It's still kind of spinning circle of death here on my end. Oh, hey, I think
You're
we
live.
might be live.
Yeah, you're live.
We've been live for 10 seconds, apparently. I had a spinning circle of death on my end when I hit the go live button. I am Justin, also known as the DIY audio guy, and I'm joined as always by my partner in crime, Nick from Toyd's DIY audio. Nick, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, like I told you earlier, my back is still killing me, but otherwise I'm doing great.
Welcome to middle age, my friend. Just be prepared for your back to hurt between now and when you die.
Yeah, you know what? I actually have come up to the conclusion that when my back starts feeling better, I'm going to start a stretching exercise. I'm done with this.
Do some yoga or something like that. When I look back on it, I can recall before my back injury, getting out of my vehicle and hand on my lower back, and oh man, I'm really kind of hurt to walk it out. And so it was coming. I just didn't see the signs and start to take precautions. And if I could go back in time, I would have not hurt my back.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Excuse me. Yeah, regular guy audio, exactly. That sciatica, I've had surgery. The sciatica hasn't gone away. I get leg cramps constantly. It's absolute living hell. So I hope that if you've ever, a damaged disc, a slipped disc, whatever you want to call it, hope none of you ever have to deal with that, because it is miserable. But that's not what we want to talk about tonight.
Hey, real quick, congratulations to Regular Guy Audio. He actually had his first live stream yesterday.
Oh, I can't believe I missed it. Really?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. It was really long. And it was kind of funny too, because he'd be like, hey, he'd talk to his wife and, is this working? Which we've all done. Anytime you first start this, you're like, we do like 10 dry runs. So we understand that.
Whenever my wife has to do something for work or something like that, she'll come to me and go, hey, can I, make sure Skype, when you Skype anymore, Zoom works. She always needs to do a run through or something. She works from home a couple of days out of the week. She actually recently published a book and has to be doing some Zoom book tours here lately. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's been exciting. She spent many years working on that, but hey, it's just part of it. Hey, regular guy, we appreciate you. I appreciate anybody who views and comments on my videos,
except for that one guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he doesn't. He's been shadow banned, so he has no idea that he's that one guy. So if y'all don't know, there is a thing on YouTube called a shadow ban. And us as creators, we can go through and we can hit this little button. And what it does is it hides your comment from the channel, but you can't see it's been hidden. So you have no idea that no one can read what you said.
I saw one guy get on one time and be like, why is no one talking to me? And it was because of that, but it was kind of funny.
I've only shadow banned a couple of people, and it's always been people that have just jumped on and have just gone right into the insults, being verbally abusive to me or other commenters in the channel. For the most part, I let people comment and say what they want. Free speech,
I agree. Yeah, most of the time I've done it to a few people as well. It's very rare. If you do get it, congratulations.
You got to work hard
to get. You got to work for it.
You got to work hard to get it. You really do.
Yeah.
I even like commenters who disagree with me. If you disagree with me, feel free to say it. It doesn't bother me a bit.
So what are we talking about today anyway?
We're talking about money tonight, Nick.
Money. I don't have any.
Can I borrow $50?
Sure. There's a bank down the road, I think. Sure. Right.
So I wanted to talk about this because of some things that Nick has been doing lately, and some of his most popular videos, and honestly, some of his best put together and just most informative and powerful videos have Rolling Thunder's having some fun.
I know. I'm like, we know you, Rolling Thunder. We know you just plug the ports. You're good. Plug them.
we know you know exactly what to do. So we just large port. That's the key. But what was I talking about? I was talking about something.
Oh, money. We were
money.
talking about
Yeah.
money, and then you said some of my videos lately.
So Nick has been putting together some really cool stuff, or he's been doing this thing where he says, "Hey, I'm going to do some research for you, and I'm going to find out what drivers are in these super expensive speakers, and I'm going to replicate them." And you've done that on your channel probably what 3 or 4 times at least.
Well, I mean, a lot of times what I do is I take the theory of what they've done and I recreate it with drivers that you can buy, because a lot of times, you know, you can't just go out and purchase the driver that Klipsch has done. Either the manufacturer will take it off the market and sell it just to Klipsch or whoever, or they will get something specifically that they want with their TS parameters or whatever. And so you'll end up, you know, coming up with an alternative. But what we'll do is we'll take a look at the speaker, we'll come up with what their goals were, we'll hit those same goals, and we'll come up with something that you can build significantly cheaper that should perform similarly, if not better.
Can you put a picture of the Cinema 10 up? Do you have access to that?
Yeah, give me about, I don't know, 25 minutes. I'll have it up.
How many minutes?
Oh, do we not have that much time? Never mind. Yeah, I have one right here. I just got to pull one up. All right, let me share my screen.
I apologize, Rolling Thunder. I must have mistaken you for someone else.
Well,
we thought you were someone else who had changed their screen name. We really thought you were someone else. We'll get to that in a second if we have time. And I've got some videos on my channel that talk about port tuning, and I would recommend watching those. And regular guys kind of got the idea here. In order to make your port lower, you can make your box. In order to tune lower, you can make your box bigger. You can make your port longer, and those two things will help you tune lower. And there's a whole lot to it beyond that. So, Nick, you have some pictures of the Cinema 10. Why is it blank?
There you go.
Oh man, you did some nice Photoshop with that.
Man, what are you talking about? That's just how awesome they look.
All right, I got a question for you.
So
how much orange paint did you buy?
1 gallon. You know what's funny is like this is all left over from like our kids' like playroom area. And so I was like, oh, I'll just keep using this. And now it's gone. So it's gone now. That was from Sherwin-Williams. I meant to get someone the color code and I completely forgot about it. I'll have to try to drop that off because I have the end of the gallon in the garage. But so these are based off the Klipsch KPT series. So the Klipsch KPT series are a series that Klipsch has designed for movie theaters. So typically small to medium sized movie theaters. They do have some that for large as well, but these ones would be more for like a medium sized movie theater. And you can't typically buy those unless you know a dealer, at least in the US. I've heard some people saying you can get some, maybe, I don't know. If you know someone, you can get some, but you know, you can't just go into a store and typically buy them. So
these you couldn't buy even if you wanted to, and if you could buy them, they're $5,000 each.
I don't know. I don't know the price because that's kind of the issue. And I said that at the end of the video. I don't really know the exact price of the KPTs. People have been throwing me numbers out all over the place. Of course, it depends on which model you're getting, right? But the truth of the matter is, if you can't buy them, what's it matter?
Right.
You know, I mean, that's kind of the point that you get to. So these were designed, and these have like some of the best off-axis performance that I've ever designed. It's pretty truly amazing.
And you deliberately designed this to be a center channel.
No, I deliberately designed it to be rear surrounds, which I wanted a wide off axis for that. But because it has such a great wide off axis, it would also work really good as a center.
So 5 of these and you're all set.
Yeah, or 3 and 2 something else, whatever. But I mean, you could do all 5, whatever.
25 Hertz to Life has an interesting comment. The spread between what it costs to make a speaker and what a retailer will sell it for. And there's a whole lot that goes into that I don't know because I've never made things to sell like that. Yes, you can make things cheaper if you mass produce it, but that's just because it's just, economies of scale. If you've got a table saw and you make one set of speakers in your entire life, then that table saw has to carry the weight of the entire expense of that one set of speakers. But if you have a table saw and you make a set of speakers every day, well, the fixed cost with that table saw gets to be really cheap.
Well, not only that, but buying materials is a lot cheaper too, right?
When you buy in bulk, yeah.
Yeah.
And The other thing too is, what's it cost to ship this stuff? If you've ever tried shipping something big and heavy like a speaker, it can add up in a hurry. And if you're going to run things like that through a retail establishment, the wholesaler has to make a profit, the retailer has to make a profit. And so, I know things like that can be really expensive at the retail level. And sometimes it's even hard to compete with it price wise with that. Sometimes there's stuff on the retail level you can't.
And that's
build.
actually one of the ways in which DIY can compete with retail, because of the fact that they have to save on shipping costs. They have to make it lighter. So they end
Right.
up using much thinner material. They end up having no real bracing in there, all these other things that end up creating resonances inside the speaker, where where you're DIY, you could put as much internal bracing as you really want, because look, it's in your house. You don't really care, as long as you never have to move it again.
Just need some help getting up the stairs. That's all. Everybody get together and let's go.
Just buy a dolly.
So Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner did a
yeah.
DAT sweep with a clipped, I'm not pronouncing it right, speaker, and he was very unimpressed with the resonances that were in that thing. And he basically said they just didn't put any damn bracing in this thing, and it was an expensive driver. This was a $1,000 speaker probably. And he's like, how come they couldn't have just put 2 more pounds of wood in this thing? That's what
probably shipping.
Right.
Wow. Shipping and materials.
So, right.
It's funny though, because we're talking about these things, but we are talking about, because there is a true cost of DIY, and it is expensive, and we don't want to get past that. And there are expenses that we don't necessarily talk about. So, the Cinema 10, things like this are ways that you can build something that maybe you couldn't necessarily go buy. Or the last video that Justin was talking about, I showed the Bonicky W5, which some of you guys are familiar with. And I basically said, can you build a $5,000+ speaker for under $500? Well, that speaker retails for anywhere between $6,000 to $12,000, depending on options. And the options, by the way, are not $6,000 worth of more options. But the components, the actual components you can buy off Parts Express and Matty Sound cost you a total of $170. And I was being very, very fair when I said $50 in crossover components, because it's not $50 worth of crossover components. But even if you spent $50 on all high-end crossover components, I mean, you're looking at no more than $320 that you're putting materials, binding posts, everything in those speakers, and they sell them for $6,000+.
Yeah. I kind of got my start on the whole DIY thing in general by building a home theater subwoofer. Still have the same driver. I've had the amp die on me, and I've rebuilt the enclosure. But I was looking at subwoofers for the home theater, and I was just really unimpressed with what was out there. I was having difficulty finding subwoofers that would list their power as RMS and not peak.
Oh, yes.
Here's one that looks like a great deal, and you're like, that's a ton of power. Let me see what we have here. Oh, it's peak. Great. So you said it's a 500-watt subwoofer. It's 125 after you actually get through and look at what's going on. And then I started to understand a little bit about how tuning frequency worked, and I realized that, for home theater, you want to tune low, much lower than you do in a car. And so, okay, I can go to Parts Express and order a plate amp. And with a little bit of luck and a coupon, I keep coupons on my blog site. You can get 10% off the darn thing, and free shipping, plate amp and a subwoofer, and a couple of weekends of learning how to run a circular saw. And I built my own subwoofer, and I don't think I built it cheaper than I could have bought it, but I was able to build a better one than I could have bought and have tools left over to build something else.
No, you're right. And my friend actually came over, and he came to my house. And that's one of the great things about DIY too, is if you don't have the tools, hopefully someone that might have tools. So he came over to my house, and we built him 2 of the Dayton reference series, RSSs, the 15-inch. I think he got the high output ones.
Yeah.
And we built 2 of those, tuned them with an extended bass shelf to go down to like 20 hertz. And we cranked those things up, and he's like, there's bass and things I didn't know there was bass before. I was like, no, it's crazy. He's like, I didn't know this. He said he's going to shake the house down someday. He probably will, because he loves bass.
We were watching something. I forget what it was. Oh, I remember. You'll find this funny. My home theater sub, I lost the plate amp in a lightning strike and recently replaced it. And didn't realize what I was missing. And the other night, one of my kids is doing Shakespeare in school, and so there's an from the '90s Romeo and Juliet movie that's absolutely terrible. All right, this is the worst adaptation of Romeo and Juliet ever. And every
Is
now and
that
then they'll do a cut sequence. What's that?
is that the one with Leonardo DiCaprio in it?
Claire Danes, yes.
Yeah, got it. Yeah,
I
I've
don't
never
know who
seen
the
it.
hell Leonardo DiCaprio is, but I know who Claire Danes is.
What? Are you serious? Inception.
I could care less about Leonardo DiCaprio, but I'd like to watch Claire Danes act.
Gotcha.
And it's horrible, right? There'd be cut sequences with music, and the cut sequence would just drop the hell out of the bass, and then the whole room would shake. And it's like, wow, I'm glad I finally got around to replacing that plate amp because it made the night. Because it was a terrible movie, except for Claire Danes.
I've never seen it, but that's awesome. Yeah,
you should watch it because Claire Danes is in it.
I don't even know who Claire Danes is, if I'm honest. I actually have no idea who that is, but
so
she sounds pretty.
When does it not make sense to try to DIY your own speaker?
I think it doesn't make sense so if you're trying to design a speaker that competes with like $100 or $200 speaker, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. You're going to come up with something that's going to be probably, you're not going to save much money. Let's put it that way. It makes more sense to try to duplicate like the more expensive ones because they have a little bit more engineering in it. And if you know what you're doing with crossovers and things of that nature, you can save yourself a lot of money. And you'll be surprised too at how many, when you learn more and more about design, how many of those high-end speakers actually don't make a lot of sense because they're actually not well designed, if that makes sense.
So I'll give you a tangible example of that. I've got a Tangband W6 that I built a small subwoofer, and I've a fun build. I enjoyed making it, and I use it as props in videos and stuff quite a bit. And it's okay for a little 6.5-inch subwoofer that really can't handle a lot of power. But what it costs to buy the material and the driver and an amplifier for it, I could have just gotten, a cheap subwoofer out of a home theater in the box at a yard sale, and it wouldn't have been as good, but it'd been more cost effective.
Yeah. So like the W5, for example, when you're using it just as a subwoofer, it's a fantastic little subwoofer. Love the thing, right? But if you're just making it as a subwoofer, I mean, if you're going to put it on your desk, it can be very, very impressive. Absolutely. But when you put it in a speaker like the Dynas and the passive Dynas, all of a sudden, that's when that driver all of a sudden makes it so much more because now you have a full range speaker that goes from, 30 hertz up to 20 kilohertz. That's really, really fun. And that bass can be really, really, dynamic. But just as a subwoofer alone, it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, that's an expensive subwoofer. It's $50, right? $45, $50.
And going from the W5 to the W6, those Tangband drivers, because I've got a W5 behind me right over here. I don't know if y'all can see it or not in the old boombox build. The W6 is, $10, $15, maybe $20 more. It's not worth the extra money.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, that's interesting that you say that because someone actually asked me to design a Dynas with a 6-inch driver in the 6.5-inch. And I said, sure, I'll go ahead and do it as a patron. And so we worked out a deal and I designed him the Dynas with the 6.5-inch. And after he listened to him, he goes, Nick, those are really good. I really don't think I needed anything more than the 5 1/4, which I told him in the first place. And it was great. He realized it. And now people realize why Denver came out with the Dynas with the 6.5-inch because you didn't add anything. You just created a little bigger box. I mean, technically you added a little more SD, but nothing crazy. So we'll talk about that later. Let's get on top. We'll talk about that at the end because
okay.
Well, all right. I'll just answer it. Why not? Me, I would be the Cinema 10s. I like the Cinema 10s a little bit better because it has a wider sound stage it's more enveloping. But if you have a really narrow room where you like to point out things more, that's what the Cinema 6 is for. So they're more kind of like direct sound, where the Cinema 10s are more enveloping. Now, because the Cinema 10s are more enveloping, that also means, you have to worry about reflections a little bit more and things of that nature. But I haven't really had any issues with it. I like the Cinema 10s. I use the Cinema 10s actually downstairs in my basement right now as fronts right now with no center. And it sounds awesome. Like, it sounds great. So, I don't think I really couldn't do that with the Cinema 6, really.
There you go. There you go. Well, you wanted to get on to something else besides that question. What was that something else, Nick?
Well, I mean, I just thought you wanted to talk a little bit more about the high cost of DIY. So I didn't know where you wanted to go with that.
I want to head over to my channel, and I want to share the screen real quick. And I want to show the results of a poll that I did on my channel, if I can find out how to do it. There we go. I don't know if y'all can see that or not. You can always change to full screen, but I'll just read it to you. So I asked a question on my channel. I wanted to know about my viewers, their thoughts on this. The question was, what is the most you've spent on a single subwoofer, just the driver only, no amp, no enclosure? Oh, excuse me. So 11% of the people who watch my videos on a regular basis have not spent more than 100. 26% have spent between no more than 200. 23% no more than 300. 14% no more than 400. And 27%, a little more than a quarter of my viewers, have spent more than $400 on a single subwoofer. And reading the comments, most of the commenters were saying, hey, I spent 800 or 1,000 or, some other large number on a subwoofer. And I thought that was interesting because I've never spent more than $200 on a single subwoofer. And I know I got a lot of viewers that have really spent a lot of money on their car audio. And what we have here is a little bit of what we call a selection bias, right? The people who watch our videos are enthusiasts. These are people who are more likely to spend that kind of money. But I would say the average person with a subwoofer is going in the $200 to $300 range, where the bulk of these viewers are. So that was interesting. And where do you save money when you're doing a car audio build? Right? When you're doing it yourself, where's the savings?
Yeah. We talked about this a little ahead of time, and I think the place where you save the most money doing a car audio build is the fabrication. Whether that be the box or whether that be the door panels or whatever.
And where you're going to save money is, okay. You're not going to save money if you're just going to throw an enclosure in a prefab box, right?
Sure.
Or building an enclosure that's similar to that. Where you save the money is where you invest a ton of labor instead to build things like custom door panels and that perfect subwoofer box that you tear apart and rebuild 15 times because it wasn't exactly the right look or sound that you wanted. And so I don't know that you can really save money in car audio because car audio just seems to be kind of expensive. I think you can save a little bit of money if you're very selective about DIY drivers. If you're looking for, head over to Parts Express, head over to Medea Sound and see what they've got that might be able to outperform a car audio brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think in both car audio and home audio, one of the biggest savings is labor. And that really comes down, and that's where I get a lot of people that get upset about my videos because they say, well, you're not counting the labor that you've added into this. And I'm like, well, yeah, because we enjoy doing this. And so even though, yes, it is a labor, but it's also something that we like doing. And so it's kind of one of those things. Yeah, you are the labor. It is going to cost you that amount of time. And you yourself have to ask yourself, is it worth it to you? Because some people it's not. The time's not worth it. So just buy something then.
I mean, if you're a medical doctor making $500,000 a year, you're going to pay someone to work on it. And even then you wouldn't want the probability of hurting yourself running wood through a table saw. Right. So you've got to consider those kind of things as well. Another poll that I did on my channel, I asked that if you're trying to make your money go as far as possible, where do you spend your hard-earned cash? 37% of my viewers said speakers are where you want to invest. So if you got a little extra money to spend, put it towards the speakers. 32% said amplifiers. 12% said the head unit. 7% said get a DSP, and 11% said the power and the wire. What are your thoughts on that, Nick? What do you agree with?
I just find it interesting that most people are spending their money on their speakers and amplifiers and spending so little on DSP or power and wire, because power, wire, and DSP, if you don't have good ones of those run, speakers and amplifiers are.
Yeah, and if you're making a big system, if you're buying $1,000 subwoofers, like 27% of my viewers seem to be doing, you're going to need a $400 alternator, and you're going to need a new belt, and you're going to need some zero gauge wire, several runs running through your amplifiers. The one thing that I would say that about this is what you have to be when you're doing this DIY thing. Be careful with the speakers, because I think that a lot of car audio brands are just rebranded stuff that you could get at Parts Express.
Well, just you can get about anywhere. They're all pretty
right.
A lot of them are similar. There are some really good brands. El Fuego said also sound deadening is where extra money should go as well, and I think you're right there. But things that can make your car sound better, like a head unit with a good, with good voltage out, that's important, because if you want your amplifiers to work well, you want that with the good voltage out, right? And then, I mean, I'm guessing most people are saying speakers because I think they're thinking subwoofers, maybe, because subwoofers are pretty expensive. And when you go back to your other poll, maybe.
I think that's interesting. If you had extra cash, where would you put it? I think the wire is probably where you should put extra cash if you have it, power and wire. The head unit's interesting because can you even replace your head unit? That's getting to be a major issue, and the expense and all the modules and stuff you need in order to get your head unit to work is getting out of hand. It is getting out of hand, and that's a real problem in car audio. But the one thing that I would say, if you had extra money to spend, the last place I would spend it is the amplifier. I think that a lot of car audio amplifiers are just selling fairy dust.
Yeah, or get some good used ones on the used market. A lot of times you can get used ones. It just, I don't know. To me, I completely agree with a lot. I almost look at it the other way, because I mean, if you have a good DSP and you know what you're doing, you can make decent speakers sound pretty good. But if you don't have a good DSP or good way to hook them up, I'm sorry, then even good speakers might not necessarily. If you don't have a good way to tweak the speakers, I should put it that way, then those speakers, they're not going to sound the greatest necessarily.
So what I would say about that is, in my specific example, several years ago when I first started my channel, I was going to do a big upgrade, put a 3-way front stage in my truck just because I wanted to. No other reason besides I wanted to try it. Totally overkill. You don't need a three-way front stage in a vehicle, really. And I bought a pair of these Kenwood amplifiers that are 4x50 watts. They're semi-waterproof amplifiers. You have a Molex plug for your speaker and connections because they don't have room to have screw down terminals for your speaker connections. And the reason why I bought them is I was watching an amp dyno on Derek's channel, and that amplifier put out the exact same amount of power as an audio control amplifier did. And the audio control 4-channel amp was $300 then. Now it's $330. And I was able to get both those Kenwoods for under what I could have bought one audio control. And maybe I just don't have a good ear, but it sounds fine to me. And if I'm not pushing them too hard, it should be fine.
No, I think you're absolutely correct with your assessment. There's definitely times where, you get sold on things that maybe you don't necessarily have to spend. And, I always ask people, why Well, you know what? I don't want to go there yet. Go ahead. You finish up before I go.
I think about like the DSP. There are a lot of companies that sell digital signal processors, but probably the best DSP out there is probably from Mini DSP.
You
And
think so?
I mean, it gets there's a lot of loyal followers of the Mini DSP, right? And
It's
they've got
definitely one of the best values for sure, right?
right, and that's it. It's one of the best values. You can get their 8x12 for 8 inputs in, 12 out for less money than most manufacturers. 6 or 4 input ins and no more than 8 out. So if you're going to do that, you just shop around a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where we get stuck at a lot in any type of audio is we get stuck with brand names. We think, oh man, I have to get ABC, I have to get audio control. I have to get Klipsch. I have to get Dayton.
Well, one advantage to a name brand, say, component set is a lot of times a component set will come with a bunch of different ways to install it. Watching 5 Star Stereo, they'll crack open a Kenwood component set, and there's tons of little plastic rings that go with that tweeter. So there's, a dozen ways you can mount that tweeter, and all the stuff you need to mount the tweeter is right there. And then they'll turn around and go acrylic cut a piece. So Car Audio Horizon says that the best DSP is the high-end Zapco Braxton Helix DSP Ultra. I would be willing to say that the Mini DSP CDSP 8x12 will hold its own against those.
I don't know, man. Supposedly, but that's kind of the thing. Supposedly the Helix is supposed to be the one if you're going to go into competition, right? It's supposed to be.
Right. You can't win unless you have the Helix because the judges are looking for the Helix.
Yeah, they're like, you don't have a Helix, you can't win. And I think that's kind of ridiculous. And once again, that comes back down to what we were just talking about. Now, here, why don't do you mind showing my screen? I want to go over to my poll
Sure.
too, because I think this is pretty interesting because I asked people, what prevents you from doing your DIY? And actually I said, thinking about my latest video, what prevents you from building your own speakers? So that's the one where I showed people that $170 worth of drivers ends up costing you $6,000 on the hi-fi market, right? Which, by the way, is ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Now, someone questioned why I chose that speaker, and it's because I can actually show you the exact speakers that you can personally go buy, so you can literally know, okay, this is exactly how much money I'd spend. Otherwise, people would say, well, you didn't show me the exact same driver. No, I did. I showed you the exact same drivers. So we got some votes on this, and this is what they said. 29% said no time. 23% said no tools. 5% said no designs that I like, which is interesting. 27% no money, and 16% other. We'll kind of discuss what some of those comments were, but what do you think about those results, first of all? You're muted. No one can hear you.
That seems consistent with like reality. Finding time to work on things is one of the hardest challenges. People are busy. People have other hobbies. People have family members they have to take care of, and kids and stuff. So no time being up at the top, I think, is typical. And the no money. I mean, the no money is a thing you can overcome, even if something as simple as, hey, I'm going to save back $50 a month, and once every 6 months, I'll have a little bit of money to buy some audio toys.
Yeah, and so this is one of the things, this is one of the reasons why I created the forum is because, hey, look, if there's not designs you like and you want to build one, as long as you're willing to put the measurement equipment, we'll help you. We'll help you with the design, right? Like just get over on the forum, spend some time on there, invest in it. We invest in you back. I mean, there's no reason not to do that. The no money, actually, I found interesting because a lot of people that were saying no money, it wasn't necessarily that they were broke. It was the fact that, like, for them to get certain drivers and things in their home country was ludicrous. And sometimes they didn't even show up. Sometimes they'd get lost at the port, which, I guess there's things that we don't usually have to worry about, but it's still things that you're like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. And the no time was interesting because a lot of people that were talking about the no time were actually saying, look, the reason why I don't have time is because it's wintertime and I don't have a place to do it during the wintertime. I don't have a workshop to go out to, or if I do, it's not heated and there's 6 feet of snow outside. And, those types of things were interesting to me. And This is really where I think the cost of DIY goes to, right? Your tools and your time. Those are like the two biggest costs that we don't talk about a lot. You don't need great tools, but it does make it a lot easier. Or you need a good friend with great tools.
If you've got, I know a track saw would be nice to have. A nice table saw is nice to have. But if you've got a cordless circular saw that matches the battery, whatever other cordless tools you have, and a Craig jig, the rip cut, that's all you need. I used a Craig jig to build my first one, built several boxes like that before I upgraded to a table saw. If you're not making anything angled or anything, that works fine. You don't even need that. You can just use a board as a straight edge. You don't need, you need something to cut with, and a circular saw is the lowest cost way to cut straight lines. And you need to be able to hold things together. If you can cut and hold things together, circular saw, jigsaw, and clamps.
Or, if you don't have clamps, one of the other ways that people hold things together, ratchet straps.
Ratchet straps. I've used those.
Yeah. And they even sell them on Amazon now that have the corner. Actually, you can buy them at Harbor Freight. They have the corners on them. Yeah, for the boxes. I use them all the time. It's great.
I've got some from Harbor Freight, and I keep forgetting that I have them. So I'll be gluing something up and like, man, I wish I had some of those ratchet straps from Harbor Freight, and then I'll find them the next day.
But I think that's true. I think that's really where the costs go. And people are right. Like, not everyone has tools. Most people do. Like, I'm going to start offering more flat packs because I realize now, especially after that poll, that there's a lot more people that I realize that just don't have the ability to cut the wood that would like to build those things. So, and if you ever see a design of mine that you want, you can ask me if I have a flat pack for it. I'll tell you if I do or not.
Man, I tell you what, I would love a flat pack and build one of your designs.
Oh, really? Well, too bad. I know. I would love to see you build one of my designs.
That would be so cool if you would could make a flat pack for me and I could build one of your designs.
That would be
I wonder
cool.
how that would happen.
I wonder what the probability of that happening is.
Mullen Performance Audio, running sheets of plywood by yourself on a table saw does suck. I've been really lucky. Both my local homes, Lowe's and Home Depot, the guys who work the panel saw are able to cut things down quite easily. And so I can cut them down into manageable sizes. So I don't have to handle the giant sheets of plywood much. But yeah, I would say, that's the thing. Like a track saw would be handy for that. In fact, after our last discussion about when we had our guest, I talked about the saw stop. Someone replied, "Hey, just get a track saw," and I'm seriously thinking that a track saw plus a CNC would be a better deal than a saw stop. So,
yeah, I agree with that, but I don't even use that. I just use one of those cheap clamps from Harbor Freight. Those straight edges. I have a clamp on either side.
Yep.
I use my circular saw, cut it down to size, throw it up on the CNC. I'm done. Yep. It's still heavy to move those sheets. I usually use I have my wife help me.
Let's see. I saw a comment that I wanted to highlight real quick. Regular Guy Audio said test tones are very handy, and I agree with that as well. When you're doing what kind of test equipment do you have, Nick, and how much have you spent on it?
So you can get into testing equipment relatively cheap, I believe. You can get a DATS V3 now, which is actually a little bit more expensive now. I think it's like 130 now, but
it's 130.
Yeah, they used to be like 100, but even at 130, it's a great product. Yeah, I have one too. Yeah. We're both pimping our DATs near.
The only downside to the DATs is that you need a computer to hook it up to. And so if you don't have a laptop that you can drag out to the garage, sometimes you're, dragging your gear into where your computer is set up. So that's a downside. I'd love to see a DATS that could interface with an Android phone or a tablet or something.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but there's DATS V2.
Oh, wow. That's very different.
Yeah, it's all in one. DATS V3 is nice because if anything happens to any of your stuff, you can just replace them all, right? Like your leads, you can replace the leads, you can replace the USB cable. Anyway, so you need DATS V3, and then you need like a testing microphone. And there are all kinds of different testing microphones. You want one calibrated. Dayton offers a bunch. I use the Omni mic, which is the more expensive one, but that's because I do this a lot, right? So Mine's like $300, but you can
And the
buy one
audio
for
mic
like,
comes with software, right?
it does. It comes with its own software. It's a good value for someone that loves doing this and wants to continue to do it. But if you're just a hobbyist, you want to do 1 or 2 speaker designs, and you're like, look, I want to design something that still costs thousands of dollars, but I want to save a lot of money. Buy DATS V3. That's $130. Buy yourself like a UMIC 1 or one of the Dayton UMM mics for like
And
70 or $100. Yeah, and RU is free, so you don't even have to spend anything on RU. So you're looking at what, like about $200, and then you're set as long as you have a computer to hook it up to.
I've got one of those microphones. I haven't gotten around to really using Rue with it. I'm going to have to for the door pod guy who sent me out the door pods, because he's just dying to he's dying to see some measurements, just because he really wants to know himself, how different it is. So hopefully there'll be a video with that when I figure out how to use Room Equalization Wizard to take measurements, because I'm a little bit rusty on that. Software is not intuitive to me. Test tones are of course extremely handy.
It's not, and just I'm gonna interject right there. Rue is not necessarily the most user friendly, and even we were talking about that with Ryan last week on the podcast. He was saying that that's where I like OmniMic, is because it is very intuitive. It already does everything. A lot of it does for you. Once again, a lot more expensive, but if you're going to be doing this a lot, I recommend that.
Yeah. That's the thing about expense. I mean, test equipment can get expensive in a hurry, and you need it sometimes. And I've got right here my trusty oscilloscope, and I've enjoyed this a lot. I like the newer version of the Lumi oscilloscope because it's so much easier to see. The original version that I had, if you could see it, you couldn't see it on camera, and so that one was very frustrating. But having test gear, having the ability to set gains properly is important. And that's one of the things you get into when you start doing the DIY thing. You have to make these trade-offs, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to do it myself. So instead of paying for labor, I've got to buy tools. And so do you actually end up saving any money?
Yes, because you get tools.
Well, you get tools and you got to buy a toolbox, right?
Yeah, but those are things like, if you like DIY, those are things that you like investing in anyway, so it's kind of exciting. But you can also sell the tools at the end if you want to. Like, I know that we drywalled, a house before and got a drywall lift and then resold it. No, we didn't get what we want. You just contact me later. William, you just contact me and we can talk about that. But yeah, we didn't get what we bought it for, but still it was cheaper than renting it. And that's the whole thing, though. I was talking about, so back to those Bonicky speakers. Someone said, yeah, but if you want to build that exact cabinet they have, you're going to have a CNC. And I'm like, you're $5,000 cheaper still, over like almost $6,000 cheaper than these speakers are right now. Just parts in. Buy yourself a CNC if that's what you really want to do. Like, go ahead.
So 2 questions I want to look at real quick. The first one is, if the chat will stop scrolling, a DIY spectrum analyzer is worth building, or just go the IRTA2. So that's what Dean and Fernando have built. Having built the DIY spectrum analyzer, I like the IRTA2 better, and I think it's probably worth spending the money on. The weak point is going to be the app, because Dean and Fernando are iOS people, because they're in the business of always doing the most expensive thing possible, which is fine. That's how they make their money running a car stereo shop. You don't make your money in a shop selling, Planet Audio. You make it selling Focal, right? And so if you have an iOS, go ahead and buy their tool instead of making the DIY analyzer. And if you are an Android person, consider buying theirs as well. And the other one that I saw pop up, which I thought we just tried to answer, El Fuego asked, what tools besides the DATs do I need to build passive crossovers? You need the measurement mics, because you got to measure the Z offset.
Yeah, calibrated measurement. Yeah, any of them. And this is the thing, people think like, well, I need a multimeter to set my amp levels and all. No, not unless you really care about what the SPL is, which you don't need for measuring crossovers. The only thing you need is DATs and a calibrated measurement microphone. And someone else had mentioned you need a soldering iron. And I guess when you're ready to build, you need a soldering iron, but you don't need it to design the crossover. Soldering irons are cheap anyway.
I love buying tools. I'm a tool downer because I'm a little bit addicted to buying tools. I would spend all my money on tools, and I'm trying to not do that. The thing that I get annoyed by are the people who tell me buy once, cry once when it comes to tools. If you're buying tools, there's 3 reasons why you're buying tools. You're either doing a project cheaper than you can pay to have it done, and so you're going to buy a tool and you're not going to cry about that because you're saving money, or you're a professional and the tool's going to make you money, so you're not going to cry about that either. Or 3, you like having tools and they're fun, so you're not going to cry about that. So don't fall into the buy once, cry once trap. Buy the tools you can afford to get the job done, always, right? Because if the tool doesn't make you money or save you money, you wouldn't buy it.
Someone said that the other day. Actually, I think it was you that said that when we were talking about the difference between like Snap-on and another one. And it's like, hey, yeah, if you're a professional and you need it replaced right away, get Snap-on. Otherwise, get the off-brand, because, most likely it's going to be doing just as good. I think it was from a Hi-Fi Vega video that we watched.
I think so. I can't keep up with the comments today. I probably shouldn't try.
So one thing that we did talk about that we haven't talked about yet is someone asked, hey, what are the other costs that make DIY expensive? And the one thing that we haven't talked about is expertise.
Yes.
Knowledge, how long that takes to gain and get. Go ahead, Justin. What do you want to say about that?
When I gain some knowledge, I'll let you know.
Why are they watching this show anyway?
Woody's 74 Nova. I just refer you to just hit my channel, because I've got several videos where I use this, and I've got a link to the model and all those channels and all those videos. So it's a Lumi oscilloscope, and so you can just hit my channel and you can catch it. So I don't know how it would hold up in an automotive technician standpoint, but try it out. It's only like $87 on Amazon, so it's not a bad deal at all.
But I would say that's the biggest reason why I think most people don't DIY stuff, is because it does cost time and money to learn those things, whether it's buying books, whether it's investing in like a forum like Toyd's DIY Audio or whatever. I mean, there is things like that where you need to put that investment in to DIY something properly. Now, anyone can build speakers. Let's just put that right out there. You can buy an off-the-shelf crossover and two components and build yourself a speaker. Now, whether that will sound good is a completely different story. But anyone can build a speaker. It's the time and knowledge that it takes to really get it down right that that's probably a big cost.
Constraint, space is a constraint as well. El Fuego says absolutely. I don't do a lot of builds in the winter because my wife likes to park in the garage in the winter. I need to find a solution to that. I don't know if the solution is I don't know what the solution is, but who knows?
I think that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of costs that go in DIY that I think that most people don't talk about. And in some cases, I think it's irrelevant. Tools, a lot of time, I think, are irrelevant because I think most people just think they have to have much better tools than what they have. You've already mentioned the tools that you can get away with. You don't need to spend a lot to get on tools. Now, if you want a professional CNC, then that's different. But you can get by with a lot. You can get by with not much, I should say.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can. And what happens is you grow in the hobby, right? You grow in skill, you grow in knowledge, and your tool collection is to start kind of growing. There was a question that popped up about base radiators, passive radiators. I just did a video on that. Short answer is that passive radiators are worth the money when you've got a small enclosure, because with a small enclosure, you need a really long port to get a low tuning. And so that's really where they kind of shine.
Yeah, I agree. Or whenever you're building a box that has a really long port. And it's interesting to me because there's still a lot of people, I think, that are so used to building. I'm going to say this not in a negative way, but just a truthful way, car subwoofer enclosures, that they don't know how to transition to home audio, because there are things that you need to worry about in home audio that you may not really need to worry about as much in car audio. Port noise is a big one. Not saying you don't need to worry about it in car audio, but people worry about it less typically. And then the other one is first port resonance. I had a guy come on my channel and say, you used the wrong port. You should have been, this big versus this big. And I'm like, well, that's a good tip for car audio. That's what most people do in car audio is they do like half the size of the driver or whatever. So 15-inch, maybe use an 8-inch, 12-inch to 6-inch port, whatever. I'm like, oh, that's great. But, you also have to pay attention to first port resonance. And if you were to use that big a port on that subwoofer, your first port resonance would be like 80 hertz. You'd be hearing it the entire time the subwoofer's going, which during a movie, that's not pleasant.
And that's sometimes why you might see a higher end speaker that maybe doesn't need a passive radiator to use one, because you're not going to have that port resonance. Lots of great comments about all that in the chat. Hard to keep up with all of it. But the tools can be expensive. One of the things that in my next video, I'm going to be doing a comparison and a really kind of cool backstory, a trade-off, a story behind these two. So I'll be comparing one of the SMD distortion detectors against the scope. And my goal is to put it on video and let you see the difference so that you can decide if it's worth the extra money to go with the SMD device. And when I sit here and look at all this test equipment that I've got just sitting on my desk, I've got my DATs over here. I've got some SMD devices. I got the oscilloscope. Wow, this stuff starts to add up in a hurry. It doesn't take long to have $1,000 in test equipment just sitting out in front of you.
And this is where I'm going back and forth. How much is it for those SMDs?
All right, so there's several different models. The old school, the original DD1 distortion detector is $200.
Okay.
And so,
Which isn't bad.
When this first came out, you were either going to be using like a lab grade benchtop oscilloscope or your ears to set your gain. Maybe a fluke or something. There weren't this didn't exist when this came out. And so in a lot of ways, the lower price point of this kind of made this irrelevant. And then they came out with an upgraded model, the DD1 Plus, and it does some extra tricks. And there'll be a video on that in the future, so I don't want to go over it all. But that's $300. And
but you don't need both. You just need one.
No, you just need one. You don't need both. And
okay.
The difference between the two is this one right here. It settles the debate of what test tone you should be using, a 0 dB or a 5 dB or whatever the case may be. And so it makes that whole process easier. And it has a display on it so you can see more information. So it'll display voltage, for example, when you're setting gains, which is handy if you're trying to gain match two different things.
So see, like that's where I come back to, right? Because in home audio, like if you really want to get like high end like measurement mic, it's only $300, which is still expensive. But once again, it depends on how many speakers you want to build, right? Or how many you want to design. I should say design, because it's not really about build. If you just want to build, just buy someone's design and build it, or buy a kit. Oh, he said, what is a decent tune to shoot for in a home audio build? I'm assuming he means subwoofer, which is close to 20 hertz. If you're just saying a tune for a speaker, that's really dependent on what your design goals are. It really,
I mean, a bookshelf speaker, somewhere between 50 and 80 hertz. Your home theater right and left and center channels. There's no need to go below 80 because THX standards is 80 is going to be the cutoff. Your subwoofer, you want to make it as big and tune it as low as you can possibly afford. A tiny little 8-inch tune super low is not going to do any good. You want lots of cone area and tune it as low as you can possibly stand. Try to get it down to 20 hertz. Try to get it lower if you can. Get an Ultimax and tune it with an F3 of 17 hertz or something.
Yeah,
that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of that. I mean, it all depends on what you're going for. I mean, yeah, if you're going THX standard 80 hertz, if you want,
for your main speakers,
yeah, well, for all of them, yeah. But if you want to, some people try to run their mains full range, and if you want to do that, sure, aim for 30 to 20 hertz.
Real quick, I've also got the amp test tool from Steve Mead, and that's almost $500. And this one right here is the tool you don't need. because you only need this tool if you have some reason why you need to know the exact amount of power your amp is putting out, which means if you're running a shop, maybe, if you're doing YouTube videos, maybe, but this is the one that the average person shouldn't spend any money on, shouldn't buy.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing. So it seems like car audio, the testing equipment, is actually more expensive
Right, because it's
because you need
oftentimes
because
branded and
often
specialized.
and you want DATs, then you want the distortion meter, and then you might want your amp dyno. So
And there's tons of others. There's the SPL Labs, which sells an SPL meter that also dyno and amp and do RTA. There's the DMRTA from Audio Control, which is an RTA, and it's kind of designed to work with their DSP and their DSP amplifiers. And that one, is a full RTA. It's got an oscilloscope feature. It can measure decibels, but not like high SPL. So you couldn't use it for a sound off competition. There's a question in the chat that I want to run by you, Nick.
oh, what specific area of audio do you think is most valuable as a business? Are full DIY custom jobs best as car audio? I mean, I would say car audio personally, because there's just more people that seem to be into it than home audio. But I don't know. What do you think? I don't really I don't know.
I mean, there's so much that goes into starting a business. And I think about what we do. I view the YouTube channel as a business because there is a little bit of revenue, right? And the IRS will come after you if you don't manage, your revenue well. And it depends on what your skills are. It depends on what your background is. It depends on what you're passionate about. And it depends a lot on, like, say, your local area. And if you want to make it like a web-based business, because the easiest thing to do is set up a website and drop ship and never touch product and just hope people hit your website and buy things. Explicit audio. Right. And so that's a thing you can do. But I know a guy here in town that he works for a relative, used to work at a car stereo shop, and they install home theater systems in houses, and they exclusively install expensive stuff in nice houses. They like to do new construction because then it's easier to run the wires, but he's in an attic, he's in a crawl space, he's running home theater wires through a house, data wires through a house. And they, someone puts a home theater room up and they wouldn't, DIY a speaker. That's outside of their kind of boundaries. So, I mean, it depends on what you're into, really, right? If you already do home construction, you could get into building home theaters and the houses you're already building.
Yeah.
Nick?
I mean, yeah, you can. I mean, most of the time, once again, unless you're doing like high-end custom install, people are just going to throw in some speaker wire and put some in-wall speakers or something. It's, so you're probably not going to get much. But if you're a construction company doing it, I'm saying.
Right. My take on it is that if you're going to get into this kind of thing, you want to make sure that you're in a market area or have access to a market area where you can charge a high price for things because of the work you're going to be putting into it, like, building speakers, right? If you want to custom build speakers, don't custom build $500 speakers. Use the same parts to make a $5,000 speaker and sell it.
Make a Bonicky W5.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. So I have a niece who bakes cakes. All right. And the advice I gave her was, don't bake $20 and $30 cakes because Walmart is going to clean your clock on those. And if you have a customer who says, well, I can get the cake at Walmart for $30, you tell them, go to Walmart and buy the cake. I told her, don't sell a cake for less than $300. Right. It's because, it's not, because she'll deliver them, right? It's not worth your time, right? And the delivery and the wear and tear on the vehicle to even bother with it, right? And so,
just depends on how good you are too.
Well, I mean, if you're not good enough to sell $300 and $500 cakes, you're not going to succeed because you can't beat Walmart with $20 cakes.
Right.
And that's the way you got to approach it. It's, do you have some skill that you can apply and make more money? doing audio versus what you're doing now. And the performance audio mentioned that. I'll give you an example. So if you
that's
go out and just
interesting.
buy,
I want to know if he lives in Pennsylvania, because I used to live in Pennsylvania near Amish country, and you're right.
Amish are everywhere. I have Amish near me.
No,
I can go buy Amish made bookcases.
But there's a difference between Amish near you and being an Amish country. When we were in Amish country, like, we literally shared the road with buggies and horses, and like you actually had to, when you got your license, had to learn a different way to drive, and there were rules with the Amish on there.
So
I don't know if you had to do
it's
that,
hit or miss, but I grew up on a farm, and my dad actually subcontracted out the farrowing operation for our pigs to Mennonites. They were, so like, I mean, I was around these people constantly as a child. Boy, they worked hard.
They're in Indiana.
There are pockets of these communities all over the place. You can find them anywhere. And multi-performance audio, Amish made speaker cabinets, right? So my wife was out looking for some decent bookcases because she's ready to upgrade from the particle board ones from Walmart that we've had for the last 20 years. And there's a place in town that sells Amish made bookcases, and a 6-foot tall bookcase is $1,200.
Wow.
And do they sell a lot of them?
They don't need to.
Probably not, but you don't need to. And so if you're going to get into audio, you're not going to compete against the home theater in a box at Walmart for $300. You need to be competing against the $6,000 speaker.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, and that's kind of the whole thing with DIY that we're talking about, is if you're trying to just build a home theater in a box speaker system, just go buy one. But if you want to build yourself, a $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 system, then that's when you start getting in DIY, because that's when you can start making the money back yourself. And and that's, I think, why some of these videos have started going well, is because I'm trying to show you the value proposition, and then it's up to you to decide if that value is good enough for you to save.
Right. That's it. I mean, that is it.
When I was in Pennsylvania, I did not eat at Lebanon Bologna. I didn't. I ate at a lot of cool places, but that was not one. I ate at Hershey Park. They had chocolate.
There you go. Build expensive outdoor furniture. I mean, I've never heard of Lebanon Bologna. That's a new one on me.
I've had Lebanon Bologna. I just haven't eaten. I don't know if there was a store or what, but.
Well, okay. I think we've been at it for about an hour. And what would you conclude about the cost of DIY audio? Is it worth it?
Yes. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it was worth it. I think as with anything, you have to count your cost and decide for yourself if it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it without a good community. I had someone actually put on the poll that I put up that, one of the reasons why they kind of got frustrated with it is because there were a lot of communities out there that, and this happens a lot, unfortunately, especially in DIY audio for home audio, where you get part of a community and then you say, hey guys, I get so excited, I want to build my own speakers. And then everyone says, don't do it. And you're like, are you serious? This guy's like so excited about building his own speaker, and you're saying, don't. Like, we actually took a member on there that said, hey, look, I want to build my own speakers. I don't know how. I have a measurement mic and I have DATs. And we walked him through the entire process. And he had all the parts already picked out. He had the box designed. He assembled it. And then we walked him through how to get the Z offset. We walked him through, and he posted some ideas of some crossovers, and then we'd get some ideas back to him, and then he'd go back and forth. And in the end, it's his decision on what the crossover looks like, right? Because it's his speaker. But we can point him to things that he's not looking at. Like, hey, did you notice your impedance is dropping to 2 ohms here? That might be kind of concerning. Or, hey, did you notice here you got your little high on, because of your resonant frequency, you're crossing over just a little too high. That might not sound good. You might get a lot of distortion in there. Things like that you may not realize, especially because he didn't have necessarily crossover components on hand. So for me, Like, you got to have that community. And so I highly recommend, obviously, my website. I don't know why I wouldn't recommend that, but because we're not going to talk down to you. We're not going to say, don't do it. We're going to say, all right, cool. Let's do it together. And let's see if we can help you out.
And it becomes cost effective when you get away from tiny projects, right? These Bluetooth boom boxes back behind me. I know those were not cost effective at all. I think I could have probably purchased a boom box and not built one, but I built one because I wanted to build one, because I wanted the challenge, wanted to try it out. And so for me, I don't think small projects are where you really pay off. And the same way with car audio, with car audio, it pays off for tiny projects. If you're just, simple head unit, amplifier, subwoofer in a box, that's much more cost effective to do that yourself if you can figure out how to run wire through the door jamb without, starting a fire, right? So in a car audio setting, simple, small install, less than $500 total equipment, getting that in your car, that's kind of a sweet spot. And the other sweet spot is when you start doing your own fabrication. But for all of this, it starts to make sense when you do it a lot.
Yeah. Especially if if you're buying the measurement equipment and stuff, if you're only going to do it once, unless you're trying to do a high end build, I mean, because still you're only looking at a couple $100 for the measurement equipment, then that also makes sense. But you're right. If you're doing it a lot, it makes a lot more sense.
And, it doesn't make sense to buy all these test gear if you're just installing $300 worth of subwoofer and amplifier in your car, and you're going to run it for 5 years and never change it out. Right. All the test equipment starts to make sense when you're like me and you're like, well, it's been 4 days since I've tried a different amplifier in my car. Let me see if I can find one. Right. That's when the gear starts to make sense. So doing it a lot, and in Nick's case, when you're actually making something that's kind of bigger, where you can save money, right? I think about my my home theater project where I made the towers using the Trichix kit. After I bought tools, after I veneered the MDF, I could have bought speakers probably just as good for the same money or less. But also, no one else in the world has an exact set of speakers like that.
And I think that's what the cool thing about DIY is. You can really make it look and act however you want. There's always going to be trade-offs, and someone's going to tell you you're doing it wrong for one reason or another because there's a trade-off. Don't listen to them. There's always a trade-off. There's always a trade-off. You're not doing it necessarily wrong. You're just choosing a trade-off that they wouldn't choose, which is different. But absolutely, I completely agree. And in our car audio section on the website, which we need more car audio guys on there. So if you guys want to get on, help us out. We do have Living Loud with Andy on there, though, and he's trying to really make that a cool thing going on there. So, get help. I mean, this whole community, though, someone had mentioned it earlier. Yeah, here it is. Keep it clean. Said home or car audio. There's so many people that don't want to help or give out tricks and forget that this kills the community. And I completely agree with you. It completely kills the community. That's the reason why I do the plans, because I want you guys to be able to get plans that you can build, that you can trust, that you don't have to worry about. Right. And if you need help, ask, like that's the whole thing. And so, yeah. And so he's trying to do the same thing with car audio on the forum as well. It's at Toyd's DIY Audio Guys /forums. So get on there and check it out. Especially if you have if you have knowledge that you think you have that share, man, we're all about it. Or if you need it.
Awesome. Well, Nick, what have you got coming up next week?
Nothing. I actually decided I'm retiring.
After those last videos, you can retire now. They did so well.
Oh yeah. They did so well. Retired. No. So I got a couple things going on. It's actually I'm finishing up the Orchard Audio amp. So Orchard Audio sent me all those awesome components. If you haven't seen that, the amplifier, basically I'm going to show you how to save. I think it's like, I haven't calculated the cost, but it's between like $1,000 and $1,500 to build your own hi-fi amplifier. It's the exact same amplifier too. So it's not, a derivative of, it is actually the exact one. Now, I also am going to be doing some testing, assuming the weather holds up, on some compression drivers. And so we're going to get some compression driver tests out there and just kind of take a look at their frequency responses and things like that.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I spent the weekend doing a little bit of filming, and I got some footage of these devices right here. And I'm going to be doing a comparison of these devices in some different situations with the hope that after you watch the video, you'll know if it's worth it to you to spend the extra money on this stuff instead of, well, this stuff. And watch out for that video. There's a really cool backstory about how I came into this equipment. I may have mentioned it on the show before. My patrons know how I came into it. I've been sitting on it for a couple of months, having trouble getting videos out lately. But I love to talk about retirement. I'm looking forward to retiring. It might be 20 years before I can do it, but I'm going to do it one day, by golly. So that's what I've got coming up. I've got a cool test video I'm working on that I hope to have out by the end of the week and launch to y'all this weekend.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I look forward to seeing that one. Especially if it saves me money.
Absolutely. I mean, knowledge is power. Knowing a little bit is what's going to save you the money, right? The person who knows the most spends the least amount of money. And if you think about it, I mean, the guy who designed this stuff has an engineering degree, all right? If you had an engineering degree, you could design one of these things too and charge what they charge for them.
There you go.
Knowledge is power. All right, gentlemen, we're over limit by about 10 minutes, so I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you to all of you in the chat for popping in to say hi. I'm Justin, the DIY audio guy, and I will see you on the next one.
See ya.